The Ayer cut is dead, while Lois Lane saves Superman. Meanwhile, the Thunderbolts apparently have lost their Sentry, and finally, turns out there may have been a better version of the Eternals, but Kevin Feige killed it. So once again, here we are at Cosmic Book News, where Matt LeBlanc is reporting on David Ayer saying he's done with DC. So David Ayer says he's done with DC and that the Ayer cut of Suicide Squad won't be getting released. It's known that the 2016 first version of the movie released in theaters is a lot different than what David Ayer intended as the studio changed things. Hey, that sounds familiar. Yes, it does. It sounds like Snyder Cut and all that. But Snyder Cut got released because at the time AT&T insisted on it in the hopes that that would give a boost for HBO Max and all that. So it was thought that, Ayer cut could follow suit with that, especially since, according to him, it was more complete than what Snyder had. And yet, it looks like it's not going to happen. It seemed like it was going to happen. It sounded like James Gunn said it will have its time. Apparently not. So, he tweeted, "I'm done with DC." Deleted tweet. Ayer said, "Nothing about the situation feels good. Studio has no interest in releasing it. It's time to run and not look back." Interesting that he deleted that one, but did they get back? Hey, no, just not at this time or whatever. I don't know. Let's see. We got a link to the tweet where he talked about the overall film very briefly, even though he's talked about it a great deal over the past months or a couple of years now. But someone asked him here, I have two questions. What makes the Ayer cut differ from what we already saw in theaters and on Blu-ray? Will we ever get a Training Day sequel? Asked and answered. It's honestly not worth answering again, but here goes. I had a complete Joker arc and character. Was scary and formidable. Harley had an arc. It was her movie, and it still is. So this doesn't surprise me per se. And he's always said that there was and Leto himself says there was enough footage shot with his Joker to make a whole other movie. I don't know about that, but certainly he had more of a presence in the original one, and that's, I think, long established. As for Harley Quinn, she's the main star of the whole thing, and apparently would have had more to it. I mean, the problem with the Suicide Squad as is, nothing really happens. There's a setup, you're introduced to the characters, and they talk about their feelings walking through a street, and they fight some monsters at the end, and that's it. Oh, and Batman shows up here and there. Different ideas about the movie sound much more intriguing. And the initial pitch for it, involving the New Gods, and Steppenwolf and everything, sounded really cool as well. I don't think that was ever shot, which is unfortunate because it would have made a more cohesive narrative for their shared universe. But I don't know. So anyway, it says Harley Quinn, it was her movie. Diablo lived. Of course, he dies in the theater version, taking on the other evil god that Enchantress woke up, or brother, or what have you. So they had a different ending. Enchantress / June had character arcs and made sense. So there, and that's another thing about it. She ends up being the main villain of the movie, with no connection to New Gods or anything. So it's just her on her own, and it's really stupid that. With Amanda Waller supposed to be so brilliant and everything, and yet the most serious threat you had was her. Plus the setup being that they wanted to form a team in case Superman ever went bad, and they were still going with it, even though he was at this point dead. The only member of that team that could have been a match for Superman or a threat to him was the Enchantress. Everybody else was a joke compared to I thought they should have had a case that involved some sort of espionage. The government wanted something, and they could have plausible deniability with saying, well, it was these supervillains who did it. It wasn't us. That kind of thing, which was the whole premise of it. But whatever. So it said Flag had a real journey. You only get snippets of that in the original. I imagine it's more expanded upon. Deadshot and Zoe more there because his whole motivation was his daughter. Deeper take, while movie was Price's brilliant score, I guess he just says the score that he intended for it, for Price, I don't recall the name, was better. So it's not a matter of a new scene or two. I honestly cannot think of a director cut, studio cut, with more difference between them. A lot of the popular issues with Suicide Squad 16 are endemic to the studio version. I made a drama, not a clown show. I made a great movie. And we'll have to take his word for it, but he's got a point. Get him its fair shake, we should have been able to see it. So what's the problem? I would have thought they could have released it at some point. I know they want to make a clean cut with DCEU, but the problem there is James Gunn's project survived. His Suicide Squad Peacemaker survives. Now, Ayer is the one who introduced Amanda Waller, but they keep her as part of Gunn's vision there. So that's still an attachment to it. A clean break, total recast and everything. I don't like it because I really liked the original cast for the most part, not all. And I would have liked to have seen that continue in some form or fashion, but I understand if there's financial reasons for it. It's the reality they're in, and they've inherited a mess from the previous regime, and so I can respect it. But you're not making the clean break, and if you're not going to make the clean break, I don't see why you can't release the Ayer cut as an Elseworlds project, which they're doing with other DC brands. So, I don't know. Here's another picture he released of Jared Leto as the Joker. Boy, he looks a lot skinnier than I remember him being. And doesn't have the damage tattoo. So, so that's an improvement. Brief sketches of the Arkham interview scene between Harley and Joker and all that, you know. And then he's got Beekeeper coming, which I saw the trailer. It looks pretty cool. Hopefully that's a great movie. But something's afoot there. So the immediate reaction is James Gunn lied. He said it would have its time, or he thought it would, and it's not really his call. And the obvious idea would be to put an exclusive release of the Ayer cut of Suicide Squad on HBO or now Max, you know, but will there be a Max? There's a lot of material being licensed out. And you can understand that. You get the money up front just out of the license fee alone to Netflix and wherever. So would that be the deal? You can still do it, you know, but this is the kind of thing you would do more like exclusivity. They're keeping Zack Snyder's cut on Max. They're not licensing that out. So it must be making some coin there. I would have thought another, but perhaps the fear is that they can't make the break because you keep, you know, announcing stuff from the past. I don't know. You could just do it. I mean, sometime this year you could do it, because the DCU's year really begins next year with the Superman film, and you release this. But then again, I don't know. Maybe Ayer's right. Maybe it's really good. It's like, hey, why not more of this? What if it is? I don't know. I assume it because it would obviously have more of a narrative and details and development for the characters in it, which would infinitely be superior to what the theatrical movie was, which isn't much of a movie at all. So odds are he's probably more right than wrong. I mean, it's his project. He's gonna, you know, he never got a chance to show it, and he gets all the blame for the other one, which isn't his, you know, that kind of thing. So I guess we'll just never know. The only thing I can see here is that he deleted those tweets, and maybe someone got back to him, hey, wait, we're just not ready for it now, or the time will come, that kind of thing. And he's probably frustrated and doesn't believe them anymore, you know. But it's all unfortunate. But one of the things that comes to my mind is Max even in more trouble. I don't know. But is it just the fear that this is another thing that overshadows their attempt to launch the DCU? there's constant stuff in reference to the past, a project. So that could be just as simple as that. As for James Gunn, did he flat out lie to him? He may feel that way, and possibly he did. But then again, don't know how much really in charge James Gunn is when overseeing factors can come in and derail whatever it was he was intending to do. And this is one of those things that goes by the wayside. That being said, it's like all his stuff survives, but no one else's does. Yeah, it's not going to sit well with quite a few players and all of this, but what are you going to do? Meanwhile, a little snippet came out from an actress who auditioned for the role of Lois Lane. And, she was talking about, she was in the run to playing Lois Lane. It ended up Rachel Brosnahan won out. And she went to read for it and says, it was a whirlwind. And then I realized it was over, but it was great. She was telling Variety this, explaining that Lois Lane is the type of role she wants to play. She saves Superman. She's the brains. She's actually the fearless one. Well, in this current era, when you hear things like that, and it's very brief and simple, this looks like a red flag, and there's quite a few with James Gunn's DCU, most notably of him praising Tom King, which is, if you're actually listening to that man about Superman or any of the DC characters, this thing's over before it began. So yes, alarm bells went off saying, oh my God, we're going to have, a misandrous take on Superman. And apparently Gunn said this cover was his inspiration for the movie. And, hey, look who's, it's interesting. So he has also described his Superman of choice as a big galoot. So the idea is that he's stupid, that she has the brains and he doesn't, and he has to save him. And this would mean that Superman, says he's fearless, while that would logically mean that Superman isn't. And is it that the villain, most people guess, would be Brainiac? It's so fierce or whatnot that, I mean, it's an absurd concept that she wouldn't be afraid of a giant monster like Brainiac, but Superman would be. So one of the key things about Lois Lane is, look, I don't know how else you put it. She was always kind of a bitch. But ultimately, she does the right thing, and she does become supportive of Clark Kent and Superman and all that. And there's difficulties in the relationship like there would be in any back and forth. It's interesting how they do it on the Superman TV show with Superman and Lois. And that edge is still there, but she's matured quite a bit because now she's a wife and mother, and there's more important things for her to be worried about and that sort of thing. And then there's the genuine love between them, and it's very well done. So aspects of that, this would be an earlier part. They're not married. She may not even know Clark is Superman at this point. I don't know at what era they're going for as of yet. So there's a lot of that there. Unfortunately, this would come across as some kind of wokeism, and yet it's always been that way. You get a whiff of that now, and people say, it's woke, leave it alone, and that's what the woke era has done. It's irradiated the landscape of pop culture, and so the slightest bit of that. Does all this mean it's derailed the movie at the beginning? Not necessarily. These are aspects of the characters that could work and fit within it. Save Superman, I don't know. That's like Lois grabs the kryptonite and throws it away so it doesn't hurt him anymore. How many times have you seen that? That's standard Superman stuff as well. That could be the deal. If it's Brainiac, it could involve the plot that Metropolis gets shrunk down and stored in his ship, and she's in there, and she's rallying the people to not give up, and Superman saves them overall. but that she's, an impressive character and brave and all that sort of stuff, and that's, fine. But we'll just have to wait and see. The problem overall for Superman Legacy is that it can't just be a good movie. It has to be excellent. 1 year out of the final run of DCEU movies, I don't think is enough to give it the rest it probably would need for a reboot. And of course, thanks to Marvel's failures more than DC's, the superhero fatigue looks more exacerbated than it really is. A good movie is a good movie, regardless of what genre it is. But there has been a saturation, sorry, of superheroes, and it does have an impact. But most notably, there's been a saturation of an awful lot of bad superhero movies, and that's the way it goes. And that creates the Mount Everest-sized hill they have to overcome. And you can cry about how unfair that is, but it is the reality. So best of luck to them, but the odds at the moment, are against them. But this in and of itself doesn't necessarily have to mean anything. But once the movie comes out and see it and say, well, boy, this was a big warning sign, but doesn't really matter because they're going forward with what they're going forward with. And if they haven't learned the lessons of the past 10 years, they never will. Meanwhile, over at the MCU, Stephen Yeun, I believe, was rumored to be the Sentry, and I think that was all but confirmed. But now, all of a sudden, he's out of it. So this was Matt McClellan again covering this story, and then it got confirmed. He did the update here. Hollywood Reporter confirms that Stephen Yeun will not be in the movie and blames the writers and actors strike for putting schedules in disarray across Hollywood. Yeun explains his Marvel exit. Daniel Rickman is sad. Steven has dropped out of Thunderbolts. Thunderbolts is rumored to be canceled back in October, with Blade possibly being in trouble. The problems with it is that once again, with a lot of these, the actual setup of it is virtually impossible to achieve. The original Thunderbolts were super villains who disguised themselves as superheroes, and then it's revealed they were actually members of the Masters of Evil. Yes, that was a group of supervillains who were bitter foes of the Avengers, but none of those characters, certainly not full fleshed out. Zemo was introduced; he was the leader of it, but none of them were developed or anything within the MCU to make that as compelling as it would have been, with the big reveal that they were actually those villains and that kind of thing. And that was the initial run. It had a life afterwards, but it ultimately became the Marvel version of the Suicide Squad. Probably the only other cooler run was when Norman Osborn was in charge of it, and that led to Dark Avengers and all that. Again, they don't have that development there. What appears to be happening here is they're going to make use of these characters from Black Widow, and there's Ghost and stuff like that. And I believe that's supposed to be a representation of the Julia Louis-Dreyfus character, whom they've been showing running around. She'd be the Amanda Waller of the group. And then some kind of roguish characters of Winter Soldier, the other Captain America, now U.S. Agent, and the new Black Widow, and Red Guardian, and all that. But none of these are, except for Ghost, who actually was a member of the team at one point, none of these are the makeup of the team. So it ends up just being Marvel's version of Suicide Squad, which is what it became anyway. But this, wouldn't lead you to some of the better stories that they had about it. Thunderbolts, for all intents and purposes, run its course in the comics as well. Whatever they were developing, and they clearly were, with the Julie Elaine character showing up. But with the trouble they're in, this might be one that gets the axe. And maybe Blade too. I just don't know. But Stephen Yeun probably did the right thing. Yeah. So finally, yes, a good version of the Eternal. Well, Just about anything had to have been better than this piece of crap. It was a terrible movie. But a while back, there was rumors of this guy Ridley, that he had a secret Marvel series, John Ridley. And then nothing ever came of it. So then he opened up about it on the Comic Book Club podcast, saying it's not in the works anymore. It was a television version of the Eternals, but good. So this happened before Feige had complete and absolute control over all things Marvel. At the time, they had the TV version, which was different and separate. It insinuated that it was all the same, but it really wasn't. So you had Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which was kind of hit and miss with me, more miss than not. Agent Carter, which I really loved. I thought that was an excellent show, but it just didn't garner an audience, and so it got canceled. Netflix's Daredevil, which was easily the best superhero television show of all time. The third season's pretty weak, but that was the pinnacle, and I don't think we'll see its like again anytime soon. Didn't watch Jessica Jones, didn't watch Luke Cage, watched a little bit of Punisher, never finished it. Defenders, watched it. Oof. And so after and then of course there was the Inhumans, which nobody wanted. This was a complete failure. So was the Eternals getting canned because that thing failed? I don't know. Or was Eternals going to be on Netflix? Probably. Who knows? But anyway, he says, my version was the good version, Ridley added. It was so effing weird. There was my version, the good version, which, is good to me, which that doesn't mean anything. There was the version that Marvel ended up doing, which I don't think that version was particularly good, I'll be honest. Yeah, it wasn't. It had bore no relationship to anything of the original story. Very little. Of course, there was race swaps and gender swaps and all of that. But even that, the personalities were gone, and the basic premise of it, what they did to the deviants, shouldn't have even had them in there. Cersei here, it was just bland, and I mean, this actress, I've seen her play like what was it? I'm dropping the name, but she was an android and all that. She plays the same character. She's very emotionless and cold and everything. And yet she's the main leader and all this stuff. That's not Cersei at all. Cersei is a very lively party girl, and kind of funny and stuff. There was none of that there. And Icarus never would have done what he did in the movie. And the rest doesn't matter. Salma Hayek, I always loved to see her, but she shouldn't have been cast in a man's role. As for Fastos, had no problem with that, him being gay, because they never did anything with his character romantically. So, well, it's a blank space, so make him gay. So, but then he gets into what it could have been about. So he says, my version started with the first thing you see is a young man, probably about 18 years old, and he's sitting there. He's sitting there for a moment, and then he lifts his hands. He has a drill in it, and he turns the drill on, and he puts the drill to his ear. What? And he starts pushing it in. It goes from there. That's the start, right? That's how it starts. And then I think you see another kid, you think, huh? He sleeps in the bathtub, covers himself with foil. It's just a really weird story about these people who are, I mean, it's just weird. So, was this better? It sounds like another version of crime. I don't see anything in here recognizably Eternals. So Ridley did say his take on the Eternals came with mixed reviews, offering that it was a really hard property to develop. Yeah, if only there was some kind of source material you could derive from. It was another Kirby thing about it. It owes itself to like ancient alien theories and stuff. The gods are aliens and this sort of thing. And that's essentially what it is, with the Celestials manipulating humanity and creating this race who were the inspiration of myths and whatnot. And you could have done something with that, yes, but didn't. So the best thing that happened for everybody was that it didn't happen with me, because I don't know that it would have been entertaining. It doesn't sound like it. It sounds like a horror movie. I don't know what that is. And I do mean that's entertaining to me. is often not entertaining. Populist, which is great for a lot of the work I do, but this needed to be a little bit more popular. Yeah, well, so I don't know. A lot of this is like Kevin Feige is looked upon as a bit of a fraud now. greenlit this crap. But you know, he was consolidating his power at the time and canceled it, and then there was the failure of the Inhumans at the time, which was bad. And then this with drills in the head and stuff. Probably thought, cancel that. So might have made the right decision at the time. Anyway, just didn't follow it with anything good. So these are always kind of interesting little tidbits here and there. But the idea that this might have been the better version, from what I'm hearing, doesn't sound like it. It just sounds like another version of that. So anyway, there you go. That should wrap us all up for this little tidbit into DCU MCU. Do you see me? I don't see you. All I see is a camera. Yeah. I'll see you next time.